Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. You probably weren't supposed to find this video. That's not a gimmick. This story is one of those whispers that never made the headlines, never got a Netflix documentary, and certainly never made it into your high school history class. It's the kind of story that towns bury, that families burn letters over, and that one generation passes down as nothing more than a strange warning. Don't ask about your grandfather. Just don't. But some secrets have a way of bleeding through the cracks. In the hills of rural Virginia, where the forest still covers more than it reveals, a family tree grew in on itself, twisting, curling, feeding on itself like a serpent. A man was born from that bloodline, and from him came children, 3 of them, each born not from love or accident, but from an act so deliberate, so methodical, it makes even hardened genealogists hesitate when they reach that branch. Because the woman he fathered those children with was his own sister. This is not a legend. This is not a ghost story. This is a real family, with names, dates, records, and scars. And if you stay with me, I'll show you how it all happened. It started, like most of these stories do, with silence. A small town, no tourists, no reporters, just church bells, crop fields, and the kind of thick quiet that lets generational sin settle into the soil. The father's name was Leonard Joel Tate, born in 1931, and from the day he entered the world, something was already wrong. You could blame the isolation, the depression, the war, but none of that explains what happened in that rotting farmhouse on the edge of Crooked Hollow Road, where no mail came, where no child, wren played, and where Leonard and his sister Ruth spent night after night behind boarded windows. If you think you're ready for what's next, just remember, even the censors didn't know what was happening in that house. Leonard Joel Tate was born into a silence that felt generational, like the walls of the house themselves had learned not to speak. His family had lived in the same stretch of backcountry for decades, maybe longer. Land records were vague, and neighbors even vaguer. They were the kind of people who kept to themselves, not out of rudeness, but out of some deep, unspoken necessity. And when you looked at the Tate household, it made sense. A sagging roof, no running water, no visitors, just 4 children, 2 parents, and one thick, choking atmosphere that hung over everything like smoke. Leonard was the eldest, Ruth was the second, 2 years younger but always close, unnaturally close. Teachers noticed it the few times the Tate children were sent to school. They'd sit beside each other, never speak to others. If separated, they'd grow quiet, twitchy, sometimes even violent. One teacher noted in 1942, "Leonard and Ruth are inseparable in a way I don't quite understand. It's not sibling affection, it's something else, something colder." By 14, Leonard had dropped out completely. Ruth followed a year later. Their mother, a pale, withdrawn woman named Alma, stopped answering questions entirely, and their father, Everett Tate, was last seen in town, buying ammunition and lie. Then, the family vanished. The house remained, but no one came in or out. No lights at night, no voices, just a boarded-up shell at the end of a gravel path, half swallowed by forest. For a time, people assumed the Tates had either left or died, until one summer, a delivery boy from nearby Wytheville claimed he saw a girl staring at him through the attic window, skin so pale it looked translucent, eyes like dead river water. No one believed him. But 2 weeks later, he went back, and he brought his brother. This time, they saw both of them. Leonard, taller now, mid-20s, and Ruth, holding a thing in her arms, a bundle, a baby. The sheriff was called, but no one answered the door. There was no warrant, no crime, just a strange family on private land. The law had no right to look inside. What no one realized was this: Leonard and Ruth were already 3 years into their life together, a brother and sister, living as man and wife. And the child the boys had seen wasn't their first. It was their second. By the time anyone dared to interfere, it was already too late. The first child, born in the dead of winter in 1951, was never recorded. No birth certificate, no doctor, no midwife, just Ruth, in labor on the dirt floor of that farmhouse while Leonard boiled rainwater and burned rags to mask the smell. The baby, a boy, lived. But something was wrong from the beginning. He didn't cry. Neighbors, those who still live nearby, would later recall hearing strange sounds on certain nights, a low, animal-like whimper that came from the trees, like a wounded fawn or a baby trying to scream through water. No one wanted to get close enough to find out. Ruth named him Elijah. The second child, a girl, came 2 years later, born in silence once again. This time, Leonard built a makeshift crib out of scrap wood and wire fencing. The child had one eye sealed shut, her limbs bent wrong. She couldn't walk until she was nearly 5, and even then it wasn't walking, it was staggering. But Leonard adored her, called her Angel. Ruth just stared, always tired, always trembling. By now, their world had shrunk into something almost inhuman. They didn't speak in full sentences anymore, just fragments, grunts. Eyes said more than mouths did. The boundaries between brother, father, husband, all of it had collapsed. And Ruth wasn't right anymore. Locals started calling her the Whispering Girl, because if she was ever seen outside, which was rare, she'd be mouthing something under her breath. Prayers, maybe, or names. But some kids swore they saw her speaking to no one, arguing with someone who wasn't there. Still, no one called social services, no one intervened. Because to do so would mean acknowledging what everyone already feared, that inside that house a brother had made his sister into something else, and from their union had come children, sick, silent children, and whose very existence felt like a curse stitched into the valley. In 1957, the third child arrived. He was different, healthy, strong, quiet, but aware, and he would be the one to escape. But not before witnessing everything. The third child was named Isaac. Born in the spring of 1957, he came into the world with no visible deformities, no twisted limbs, no missing eyes or crooked spine. He looked normal, hauntingly so. And from the moment he could walk, it was clear he was watching, absorbing, remembering. While Elijah rocked back and forth for hours in silence, and his sister Ruth Ann mumbled songs to the walls, Isaac stared. He would follow Leonard around the house like a shadow. He learned to mimic his father's gestures, even his temper. But it was Ruth, his mother-aunt, who unsettled him most. She had started to deteriorate by then, not physically, but mentally. She would stand in the hallway, whispering to the wallpaper, scribble words on the floor in charcoal. Sometimes she'd scream in the middle of the night, thrashing in bed until Leonard pinned her down, hissing, "They'll hear you. Shut up, Ruth. You'll ruin it again." What it was, no one knows. But the house had rules, dark, invisible ones. Isaac learned them early. Don't go in the attic. Don't ask about your siblings, and never, ever talk about what Daddy does after dark. Because by the late 1950s, Leonard had changed. His body was still strong, but his face had hardened into something wolfish. Cold eyes, thin mouth. He kept a shotgun by the door and built new locks on every window. He believed they were being watched. Not by the town, by them, he'd mutter. The watchers, the takers. Something ancient and vengeful. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was madness. But Leonard believed that the outside world wanted to destroy what he had built with Ruth, his pure bloodline. Isaac would later describe it in his journal, the only surviving document from this family. He wrote, "Father said the blood must stay clean, that's why I was made. I carry it all, but sometimes I dream I'm covered in tar and she's standing over me, crying blood. I think it was my mother. I think she wanted out." Isaac was only 7 when he realized what he was. A son, a nephew, a relic. And something inside him began to fracture. It was around this time that Ruth tried to end it all, but Leonard stopped her, just like always, and the house, once again, went quiet. In the fall of 1966, when Isaac was 9, the silence finally broke. Ruth, once the obedient, broken vessel of Leonard's twisted legacy, began to rebel. Subtly at first, she started hiding scraps of food, leaving cryptic notes in the floorboards, teaching Isaac how to read from an old, water-damaged Bible, despite Leonard forbidding any outside influence. Something had changed in her. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was watching her 2 older children drift deeper into some unreachable place. Or maybe she saw in Isaac, her son, her nephew, the last flicker of something innocent. That same year, Ruth Ann died. No funeral, no grave, no priest. She was buried somewhere on the property, under a mound of earth that Leonard covered himself. Neighbors noticed Leonard in town more often after that. Slower, grayer, but still towering and wild-eyed. He started speaking in riddles, quoting scripture that didn't exist, talking about the flood to come and the blood that would save the line. He smelled like wood smoke and mold. Something was unraveling, and Ruth knew it. One night she tried to run with Isaac, just the 2 of them. She waited until Leonard passed out drunk in the barn, grabbed Isaac by the hand, and ran barefoot through the woods. She made it nearly a mile before Leonard found them. He beat her so badly she couldn't speak for a week. Isaac never forgot the sound of her teeth hitting the tree trunk. After that, everything changed. Leonard began locking Isaac in the root cellar, for hours, sometimes days. There were no lights, just the smell of wet soil, old bones, and something Isaac described as a heartbeat in the walls. He began to hallucinate voices. His brother Elijah, though mute, would sometimes sit outside the cellar and rock violently, humming to himself. Ruth stopped leaving the bedroom altogether. And then came the fire. Nobody knows how it started. But one October night in 1968, the Tate farmhouse lit up like a funeral pyre. It burned fast, violently. Neighbors saw it from miles away. But by the time anyone got close, it was too late. The fire had consumed everything. Everything. Except Isaac. He was found wandering the road at dawn, barefoot and bleeding from the arms, staring blankly ahead. When the sheriff asked where his parents were, he only said, "They're inside, but not all of them are dead." Only one body was recovered. Ruth's. Leonard was gone, and no one has seen him since. If you're still watching, you're already braver than most. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done if this was your bloodline? Isaac was placed in state custody, temporarily. No extended family came forward, no one claimed him, and while officials tried to label him a victim, there was something about the boy that made people uneasy. He didn't cry. He didn't ask for his mother. He didn't even flinch when asked about the fire. Instead, he'd stare at the social workers with an eerie calm and say things like, "My father's not dead. He went underground. He'll come back when the blood forgets." Doctors diagnosed him with trauma-induced dissociation. They said he'd been through too much, that his grasp on reality had shattered. But there was something else. Something they couldn't explain. Isaac had an awareness, a knowing, like he'd seen beyond something others weren't meant to glimpse. He was moved from foster home to foster home, but he never stayed long. One family in Roanoke found strange drawings under his bed, sigils, circles, names repeated over and over again. Another family claimed he would sleepwalk into the woods at night and whisper to the trees. Eventually, the system gave up. By the time he turned 18, he was released. No records beyond that. But then, in 1982, a body was found in the very woods where the Tate farmhouse once stood. It was almost fully decomposed, animal-eaten, but DNA testing, decades later, confirmed it. Elijah, the eldest child. He had died alone, less than a mile from the remains of the house. The autopsy raised even more questions, because he hadn't been buried. He'd been posed, kneeling, with his hands folded, as if in prayer, and carved into his back was a word: return. Police questioned Isaac, who was now living under a different name in Tennessee, but he claimed to know nothing. In fact, he seemed unsurprised. He told them he finally heard the call. Father always said Elijah would lead the way. No charges were filed, but not long after Isaac disappeared. His home was found abandoned, no sign of struggle, no blood, just a series of journal pages nailed to the walls. The last entry read, "When the third eye opens, the door will not stay shut. The line must continue. The blood is the key." Some believe Isaac lost his mind. Others believe he was following a legacy passed down by Leonard, a doctrine of purity, of inbreeding, of isolation so absolute it created its own logic, its own God. And to this day, no one knows where Leonard went. Some say he died in that fire. Others aren't so sure, because occasionally hikers still go missing in those woods. Every town has a story it tries to erase, a name it refuses to speak, a house it bulldozes not for development but for exorcism. In this part of Virginia, that name is Tate. The land where the farmhouse once stood is still abandoned. Locals call it Dead Hollow now, not because of any official designation, but because of what people feel when they step too close. Phones stop working, the air feels heavy. Some say you can hear scratching beneath the soil if you stand still long enough. In 2007, a group of amateur urban explorers ventured into the woods to find the ruins. They filmed the entire journey. The footage was never publicly released, but snippets leaked onto obscure forums. What they captured was grainy but disturbing. They found the basement, still intact. Inside were dozens of bones, animal mostly, but not all. One wall had been painted over with something dark, possibly blood. Scrawled across it in erratic, looping handwriting were the words, "He is not father. He is not man. He is the mouth." Authorities closed the case again, labeled it local folklore. But then, in 2013, someone posted a photo anonymously on a paranormal message board. It showed an old man, gaunt and wild-eyed, standing at the tree line near Dead Hollow. His clothes were wrong, like they hadn't changed since the 1960s. His expression was blank, dead. One user enhanced the photo, enlarged the eyes. They matched an old photo of Leonard Tate from 1959. Of course, skeptics will say it's a hoax, a coincidence, a misidentification. But those who know this story, who've seen the documents, read the journals, and felt that cold pressure in the chest when standing too close to the forest, they believe otherwise. Because the legacy of the Tates was never just about inbreeding, it was about preservation, a belief passed from father to child, that their bloodline was not only pure but chosen, that their isolation wasn't madness but protection from the outside, from contamination, from whatever lurked in the world beyond the tree line. And Isaac, wherever he is now, may still be carrying that belief, still searching, still waiting, still watching. So if you ever find yourself on an empty road in Virginia, and the trees begin to whisper, and the wind carries a name you don't remember giving to your children, walk away. Don't answer. Some bloodlines were never meant to continue, and some doors, once opened, never close again. If you found this story disturbing, let us know in the comments. And if you've heard whispers like these in your own family, a relative no one speaks of, a farmhouse no one visits, we want to hear about it. Until next time, keep your eyes on the past.